be seated. Well, I want to thank you as a congregation for enfolding me for the past 29 years. It's longer than most priests get to hang around any congregation. But I know that you have prayed for me and for Mary. I know that this congregation has been very supportive, giving advice to me, solicited or unsolicited, but nevertheless always so important in this life. Now, you would have to be blind or deaf to not know that we are in a great travail today in this world. A great transition. Things to learn. But let's begin with the awareness that we are one people. God did not create one of us. God created all of us, and God continues to create us. When we baptize new babies, it's because God has created another life in this world. We are aware, we have the ability to be aware today of the entire world. When a tragedy happens, it's not like we have to wait for the newspaper presses to print ink. Something in your pocket or your pocketbook starts jangling, or you happen to be on a screen, and immediately you know what happened in Lewiston, Maine. You know what happened in Israel and Gaza. You know what happens all around the world. Immediately. Which reveals to us that the entire world is our relatives. Everybody in this world is a brother, a sister, a mother, a daughter, a child. Whatever you want to call them, they are all our relatives. And there is no longer any value in using the pronoun them or they. They didn't do anything. We, our relatives, did it. And that makes it difficult for us to understand how we live in this world, because for so long we've been bifurcated with they, them, and ain't it awful? Now, as long as that's just a private conversation, or maybe it's a passing rhetorical message, might not be so bad. But when coupled with this ability to see everything that goes on in the world immediately, we also discover that using the they builds outrage. Use that to build its own wealth, its own power, and its own celebrity. And that's a problem for us. That's a problem for us. Now, when Jesus uses the word love, he's not talking about the love that you have for your spouse. He's not talking about the love you have for your children. He's not even talking about the love you have for a deep personal friend. He uses the word agape. Now, if you're familiar with agape, you know where we're going. And if you're not, I commend you a short book by C.S. Lewis called The Four Loves, where he distinguishes between affection, storge, our fellowship love, which is philios, our love for our spouse as eros, and the love that goes beyond our own needs, agape. This is the love that's a sacrificial love. This is the love a teacher has for her children when she stays up nights preparing for one special ed child who needs special attention. This is the agape is the love that a doctor or a nurse has during an epidemic when they work hours and hours and put their own health at jeopardy. This is the love God had for us when he sent his only Son. That kind of sacrificial love is the love that we talk about when we hear Jesus say, love God with all your heart and mind and soul. That love which is agape. That sacrificing love for God because God has that kind of love for us. And that agape love is what Jesus is talking about when we love our neighbor. Now, neighbor used to be the people we could see outside our window next door. But the window that we carry around in our pocket reveals to us that our neighbor is global. Those are the neighbors. Now, having seen, having understood, having realized that kind of love from my childhood that I learned from my mother in Bible school and Sunday school, and from great preachers who knew that love personally and wanted to share it with me, I am faced now with, on the one hand, this great gift, this blessing of being able to speak to my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, wherever they are in the world. And I have the privilege of getting all that information. And in doing that, we begin to discover all the atrocities, not just in the present, but throughout the past. We struggle with the genocide for the Native Americans. We struggle with what happened with the boarding schools with Native children. We struggle with all of those great difficulties in the past. But they're here with us. Now, the question that I have, not only of you, and not only of me, but of God, how, with all this violence in the world, God, do you expect me to love those enemies? Those people who did something wrong to my relatives. The violence that is in the world today. How do we respond with love? What does it mean to love those who persecute you? To love those who hate you? To love those who are divided from you? To love those who, for some of you, this Thanksgiving will be sitting across the table from pure Christian following Jesus comes to understand God doesn't have a dog in this fight. God does not choose sides. We are all loved by God, infinitely, preciously, intimately. And God suffers with us, sacrificing his own Son for us. But God always seeks the good and well-being of others, as should we. We are all loved by God, and Jesus tells us not not as a rule. This is not a law. This is not something we have to suffer with because somebody said we ought to. This is the way the world works. Martin Luther King said, he said on August 16th, 1967, he addressed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which I think was the last formal address to that conference. And he said, I'm concerned about a better world. I'm concerned about justice. I'm concerned about brotherhood, sisterhood, how we live in the world with each other. And when we are concerned about that, the truth, we can never advocate violence. For through violence, we might murder a murderer, but we can't murder murder. Through violence, we can murder a liar. We can separate ourselves from a liar. We can build walls, but we can't establish truth. Through violence, we can separate, be divided from a hater. We might even murder a hater, but we can't murder hate through violence. Darkness does not put out darkness. Only light can do that. And so I say to you, along with Martin Luther King, I have also decided to stick with love. For I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems. And I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about love in some circles today. I've even heard Christians say, enough of this Jesus love stuff. It doesn't work today. You got to be aggressive. You got to be assertive. You got to be on the side of the right and take out the rest of the world because they're wrong. But I've decided to speak about this agape love. And I'm not talking about that emotional bosh or the other three kinds of love. I talk about love, about strong, demanding love. For I have seen too much hate, and hate is too great a burden to bear. I've decided to love. Now, let me give you a framework to see the world today. One of the great benefits that I found with this great communication tool we have was being able to meet people around the world, to raise funds for necessary, important projects that would help people in need. And it was so until about 2012. About 2012, we discovered that you can use this great communication device, this empathy that was there, which caused people to write checks, send money, send resources, to offer themselves to help those in need. We found that we could use that empathy to create outrage. And the outrage machine began. And it began to lead us down this dark pathway where when something happened, we said, it's terrible what they are doing, which caused them to say, it's terrible what you're doing. And we all went down that dark pathway of rage. And you can see it today. Children who are addicted to following that. News that as it is said in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. Because it's outrage that causes us that emotional response to want to see what happens next. What did they say to that? What should be said to that? And it glues our eyes and our ears to that message. The outrage machine makes lots of money. It creates lots of power through its divisiveness. And it makes some people very, very popular. We, through our agape love, are susceptible to having our love turned into outrage. And we have to be on guard so that we are not drawn into one side or the other, but we move above that as a mature Christian, looking to how do we love even our enemies? How do we pray for them? How do we be with those who are with us, who understand the tension that's in the world today, and are willing to stand looking for the ways that we can recognize what we share as human beings, what values we have as human beings, how we can pray for those who would oppress us, that we would want to be divided from. That's the love that Jesus is talking about. And this is not just a nice rule or a law. What Jesus is demonstrating to us and articulating is this is the way the world works. Now again, Martin Luther King said, we have a choice. He warned us prophetically. He said, we shall either learn to live as brothers and sisters in this great human family, as all of our relatives, or we will perish together as fools. The choice is ours. Chaos, community. We're all children of God, equally bearing the image of God, each of infinite worth, value, and dignity. Hanging on to that, recognizing that, and standing in the midst of the gap and loving. And this doesn't just apply to lands far away or to political leaders. It can apply to us. It's not just about Israel and Gaza, Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ukraine, Armenia, Haiti, or even the great division in our country. It's about Will Crist. It's about you and me. It's about all of us in this church who follow Jesus, and all of us who are part of God's human family. And Jesus said it this way, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and so fulfill the law and the prophets. In this world of disagreements and agreements, we can, when we choose, we can treat each other with love, honor, and respect. For that is God's way of love and life. And that is the only hope for humanity. My prayer is that you recognize how deeply God loves you, and that you step into that gap that has been created for us, steadfastly loving, recognizing that that is the blessing of God for us in this age, and continue to have that great life that God has in mind for you. Thanks be to God.